Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cosmic Egg. And as you know, this show is not timid about bringing on controversial issues. This week we have rather interesting information to share with you and a very, very controversial figure. His name is Vladimir Terziski, and he is here joining us to impart on us an awful lot of information. So Vladimir, welcome, and I'm very glad that you managed to make it.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Now, Vladimir, I've looked at your credits and I'm terribly impressed. In fact, looking at what you've done in terms of education, I'm really surprised. Here you have a Bachelor of Science in Physics, you have a Master of Science in Electronics, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. You have brought on to me an awful lot of information about about Nazi Germany and the technology that they had in the 40s. Now, I am absolutely astounded by the information that you have to share with us. You have brought on pictures. Could you please tell us about these pictures and what they actually are telling us?
Well, in one sentence, while researching UFOs in general and the terrestrial component of the alien presence in particular, namely secret terrestrial programs that have been dealing with anti-gravity and secret space programs for the last almost 100 years, I realized that a lot of these secret projects are covered up behind the alien smokescreen, and later on laundered to the general public as an alien technology gift to us. And in order to pull the carpet from under the feet of the government, or let's call it the party line American ufology, I've been doing research on Nazi UFOs, on the 50 or more basically different models of craft that the Germans built before and during the Second World War, powered by every engine that was in production in Germany at that time, by piston engines, Wankel engines, turbojet engines, ramjet, pulse jets, rocket engines, and the final and most advanced models were powered by electromagnetogravitic drives. These are the most, basically no moving part drives. But in order to convince someone that this massive research and development conspiracy, let's call it, and this secret space program run by the Germans has been on for all these years. Actually, the persistent rumors are that the Germans landed on the moon and Mars before the war ended. And later they were followed by many other secret programs, but we will talk about that probably in a future show. The Russians and the Americans landed on the moon and Mars in the late 40s and early 50s respectively. An Italian team landed on Mars in 56. Many superpowers have been actively pursuing secret space programs based on anti-gravity propulsion. But in order to convince someone of the existence of this massive research and development conspiracy, one first has to be convinced of the existence of political and economic conspiracies in this world. Here I have a few little books that are probably the best introduction into the field of economic conspiracies. None there called Conspiracy and the Fourth Reich of the Rich by Des Griffin. One of the best books on the New World Order conspiracies and secret government projects is Bill Cooper's book, Behold a Pale Horse. There isn't much time for further political conspiratorial introduction, but behind the political conspiracies are the scientific conspiracies, or the secret sciences of the hermetic societies and brotherhoods that for thousands of years have been practicing endeavors that are considered science fiction by the general public. This is a book about flying devices built in India 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. In my research, bibliographic research, I have a vast collection of several hundred books on this topic, and these are some of the most interesting ones relating particularly to German secret weapons.
Okay, so in this book that you just brought on, you talk about Germany already. Does this actually mention that Germany, before the Second World War, being involved in very, very advanced technology?
Yes, actually, these books mention a lot of extremely bizarre, almost science fiction military technologies. And the first book that mentions particularly the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany is the book Intercept UFO, or Intercept But Don't Shoot, by Renato Vesco.
Now, Renato Vesco, was he part of the Mussolini government?
Renato Vesco was actually a very leading figure in the Italian research and development effort. He was the research and development boss of the Italian Air Force. He may not have been a Werner von Braun, but he definitely was an extremely brilliant scientist and engineer. And besides that, Italians and Japanese were regularly briefed on all secret German developments during the war. So after the war, when he wrote the book, he knew exactly what he was writing about. Actually, he wrote and discussed in great detail the first several models of flying saucers that were built in Germany. This is the turbojet-powered flying saucer built by Schriever, diameter of about 30 feet. And the joint project, this was the first operational interceptor fighter saucer that was built by Belonzo, Miete, and Schriever. A very interesting fictional history of the German flying saucer effort are these two books by Harbinson, Inception and Genesis, written as documental fiction, but in my opinion they just show the basically the very first level of this tremendous research pyramid that happened in Germany. I have some photographs that were extremely rare to find. Many of these were pulled out of German libraries by our research associates and friends. Most of them are impossible to find in the United States. The third model that we talked about is a very interesting photograph done in 1952 over Mount Rainier in Washington State. And in my opinion, this is a flying Kugelblitz, or ball lightning, automatic anti-aircraft weapons platform that was captured by the Americans and test flown secretly from bases in the western United States and northwestern Canada. Later on, through German sources, we have discovered not only turbojet-powered craft, but these are rocket-powered craft with rocket engines of the V2 type. And the subsequent model of Miete, these two craft had an exoatmospheric capability, and they could easily go in orbit around the Earth. This is a very interesting drawing of a saucer-type dreadnought, a 60-yard diameter, this is about 200 feet diameter, interplanetary craft that has huge sleeping compartments. It is basically 10 stories tall. Drawings were published in Germany by a little secret society there.
What would have been the purpose of that Schriever flying disc here?
It had definitely an interplanetary objective, because a flying saucer that can circle the Earth in 1.5 hours does not need sleeping compartments. You don't have to sleep between your during your flight. Basically, the longest distance you can travel around the planet is 1-2 hours at the most.
Right.
So obviously, sleeping compartments on such a massive scale would be needed only for a craft that would land on the moon, that would stay there for a long time and come back.
So you're actually saying that the Germans pre-World War II were refining the technology in order to actually travel to a different planet?
Exactly. These two models are capable of going in orbit around the Earth and probably going in an extended elliptical orbit toward the moon. This huge craft is capable of getting into orbit around the moon and landing on the planet. And These were actually the most primitive of the models that the Germans built. 2 months ago, I received, through some private channels, a secret documentary film made by the German secret society, the Thule-Gesellschaft, something like an equivalent of the Illuminati society here. The title of this documentary, 2-hour documentary film, is UFOs, the Third Reich Strikes Back. This is the emblem of this secret society. They were basically the ideologues of the Third Reich. Talking too much about Germany, I would not like the discussion to be considered as an apology of the German success. What the Germans did to millions of hapless victims in World War II, I mean, they earned enough karma from themselves to last them for this and many subsequent lifetimes to come, for these of us that believe in karma. But once these things invented, they were shared later by the superpowers. They cannot be disinvented, to use Daniel Bell's interesting
One thought
expression.
keeps coming back to me, and that is almost world supremacy. I'm looking at this and I'm going, what's the incentive? What's the reasoning behind trying to refine such technology?
Well, it gives man an ability to go to the moon, to explore the planets of the solar system, to go beyond the solar system. Some of these larger crafts were definitely able to go beyond the solar system, as we shall see very soon. The first row of photographs, actually this is a very small part, this is maybe a third of all the documentary photographs shown in the German documentary video. These are interceptor fighter craft of the Vril series that have never been written about in any other source in the world literature so far. They were about 30 feet in diameter and extremely maneuverable. Their speed was almost 3 times the speed of sound. For them, Allied bombers and fighters were basically sitting ducks. Renato Vesco, in his book, depicts about 3 dozen attacks of flying saucers on Allied bomber formations with devastating consequences, and these all were attacks of the previous and more primitive craft. These craft were developed in the very last years of the war, 44, 45. This subsequent line here are the 25-meter diameter, which is about 75-meter diameter, 30 feet tall tank killers, the craft of the Haunebu type. We've never seen before UFOs with tank turrets attached underneath.
Oh, yeah.
We see different models of tank turrets. Actually, these are standard issue turrets for the German Panther tank and the Panzervier tank. Later models developed in the 60s from the German colony on the South Pole, which is another very controversial issue. Admiral Byrd led an expedition to the South Pole in '47, trying to wipe out the Germans, but he was beaten very badly. In just 2.5 weeks he had to leave the continent because the Germans had perfected all these craft. On the bottom row we have the most interesting examples here. This is an original drawing of a cigar-shaped mothership of 330 feet length that was carrying inside itself one of the tank killer craft and 3 of the interceptor fighter saucers.
So how big was this cigar-shaped
It
craft?
was about 90 to 100 feet in diameter and 330, 350 feet length. This is a football field size craft. The most interesting, and this could be photographs of German crafts in flight well after the end of the World War, probably flown from their base on the South Pole.
In what year was that, approximately?
These photographs were taken 42, these are and 43, these are 44 and 45. These were taken after the war. The drawings date from 1943. The biggest craft that the Germans built was the 74-meter diameter. This is about 220 feet diameter flying saucer of the Haunebu 3 type. This is a naval warfare craft with, we can see here in these turrets, triple guns of a naval caliber, 3 turrets on the underbelly and a 4th turret on the top. This was a craft made for huge naval warfare. According to this film, the only craft was taken and flown from the Earth to Mars by a huge crew of basically volunteers and self-sacrificial crew of Germans and Japanese. And it landed on January 15, 1946. After 8 months of flight, they departed April 45, a month before the war ended in Germany. And they crash landed on Mars. The gravity field there is too weak, so the craft couldn't make it real nice in the landing. The most interesting things about this craft are that these are free energy devices. These are basically flying converters of gravitational energy that convert the energy of the geomagnetic field of Earth into the electromagnetic energy of flight. So these craft never had to tank. They never had to replenish their reservoirs. They had actually tapped into the inexhaustible reservoir of free gravitational energy of the planet. This is something even more taboo as a topic than the fact that the Germans developed all these 50 different models of craft. Because if one is able to go basically for free to the moon and Mars without using a single gram of fuel, free riding on the gravitational currents of our solar system, then a lot of our present-day economy about, well, we all have to pay for the fuel when we tank our cars, becomes obsolete.
So let's discuss this in much more depth. In your estimation, where is all this technology stored?
Well, Germans were not the first one to develop this technology. John Keely presented his anti-gravity flying bathtub, as if we may call it like this, a funny-looking contraption. He sat on it, rose noiselessly, accelerated to a very fast speed, and came back and landed in front of the stunned eyes of the War Ministry here in the United States in the 1860s. They said, well, we can't find any possible use of this device.
Where was Nazi Germany? I mean, when did Nazi Germany actually come into play?
There are persistent rumors that the Germans were contacted by one extraterrestrial race, as have been all governments of all superpowers all throughout the terrestrial history. But that particular race was the cause of this tremendous explosion, this cornucopia of German killing machines and advanced weapons technologies that had absolutely no precursor whatsoever in previous terrestrial developments. So basically from the 20s and 30s, Germany was actively pursuing research in rocket propulsion, in anti-gravity propulsion, in free energy devices that were later combined with their flying saucers to make these formidable weapons. Later on, this technology was used by the secret powers, by Russians, by the superpowers, namely the Russians, the British, the Americans, the French. Even the rumors are that the Israelis and the Brazilians have their own anti-gravity craft in operation these days.
I have a question that's burning me. That question is, why didn't the Germans at the time when they were actually losing the war, why did they not actually throw all the technology that they had, such as this, and just as much as possible obliterate the enemy?
Oh, well, actually, we are getting here very deep into the political and banking conspiracies behind these wars. A war is not meant to obliterate the enemy. A war is meant to load the credit card of the government by forcing it to buy more armament. If you obliterate the enemy, there wouldn't be any future enemy for the future war that is coming. Okay. So basically, all these wars have been orchestrated and choreographed by the same world banking elite that has been funding both sides in a conflict.
But in what way would that benefit Nazi Germany?
Well, actually, from the mid-30s, the Germans were actively involved in their South Polar research. From the late 30s, they started building their underground bases on the South Pole, and by 45, they have moved, according to some rumors, from a few 100,000 to up to 1 million of slave labor and Nazi scientists and SS officers down there in this huge underground colony that later on engaged in space exploration and genetic research. According to persistent rumors, basically all the genetic research going on in the underground labs these days in the United States has been started in Nazi Germany. I know a very good movie producer who was working on one UFO documentary, and he saw in a military base here in the United States a documentary film, 30-minute film about genetic research on humans, crossbreedings between humans and animals in Nazi Germany 50 years ago in the concentration camps. So the South Polar colony had primarily its goals in space exploration and genetic research. So basically the Germans were saving all these devices for the defense of the South Polar colony, which Admiral Byrd learned unexpectedly that they had made an impenetrable fortress there.
So why did we not find out about what happened to Admiral Byrd?
Well, there's an interesting interview in an Argentinian paper. He probably gave that on his way back from the South Pole before the security lid was clamped on him, where he said the next World War would be fought with an extremely powerful adversary that has the ability to fly from pole to pole. He was obviously talking about the German craft that obliterated his aviation. All his planes were shot down in less than 3 weeks. He came down with 3 carrier fleets with 3 formations of carriers and support craft and 4,000 troops, and was beaten in less than 3 weeks and hastily retreated from
After the Second World War, Nazi Germany, obviously after its defeat, was there a tacit agreement that they could keep that technology and refine it further? I'm surprised that...
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have to keep in mind that the Rothschilds and all the other European bankers have been financing for 300 years both sides in every conflict. And this is the best way for them to have the government load their credit cards, and so then to live off these enormous interest on these loans. During the Second World War, Nazi Germany was financed by basically the Wall Street and the American banking community and the European banking community, as was the Russian Bolshevik Revolution.
Are you saying that German bankers, namely some of the big families, were behind the revolution in Russia?
Well, the Russian Revolution was financed by Wall Street, by the Vatican, and by South African gold. It was financed, it was planned, financed, paid for, carried, and later on Wall Street helped Russia in the first 20 years of the most difficult 20th, basically in the 20s and 30s, by propping up the Russian economy. So what happened to the German South Polar colony? I think that Admiral Byrd probably concluded the first tacit agreement or condominium agreement between the Americans and the Germans, namely that let's not interfere into each other's affairs. Maybe even we would do some trading. We would be trading with crude materials, raw materials, bolts, nuts, metal profiles, raw materials, and you would be giving us some of your astonishing technology. This is according to Renato Vesco in his book Intercept But Don't Shoot, and according to the book of Genesis.
These are fictionalized.
The second, yes, but this is a documentary, highly engineering, highly specialized report on the German anti-gravity research and development. I have a lot of information about secret collusion between the United States and Russia, all behind the smoke screen of the Cold War.
But Germany, what's Germany's involvement in the Cold War?
Official West Germany, very little. Basically, they were the strongest member of NATO. But the secret German colony on the South Pole was basically working hand in hand with the secret Soviet-American space program. It is rumored that when the Russians and Americans landed on a joint flight to the moon with a probably American-made saucer in the late 40s, not only that they discovered the German swastika flags already planted in the most famous craters on the moon, but they spent a few days as guests to the German ex-Nazi moon base.
Yeah. So you have so much information, it's staggering. In fact, I'm absolutely overwhelmed by all the information that you've managed to share with us in such short time. And I would like to be able to invite you for further shows where we can go much deeper into how all this Nazi Germany involvement came about and where it's really taking us to ultimately.
Actually, I have several videos that I've been selling for the last 1 year. Any one of the viewers that are interested in obtaining more detailed information and lengthy bibliographies, I have a bibliography that runs into the hundreds of volumes.
We will have
detailed bibliography. From that phone number at the end of the show, they can order some of these videos. I'll be making some new ones. Basically, it's a very interesting collection of documentary films and materials.
Wonderful. Well, I'm really glad that you actually came today to share all this information with us, and I hope that we will go much deeper next time into all of this
Next
stuff.
time I would like to talk about the secret Russian-American space programs, the landing on the moon in the late 40s, the landing on Mars in the early 50s. I even think that I have a documentary footage of the first joint landing on Mars. The film says that it was made in '62. I have a suspicion that it was way back in '52.
Way back.
A saucer landing by the two superpowers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on The Cosmic Egg. And please write in, send us your comments, give us your suggestions, and thank you again for joining us on this show. Bye-bye.
Flying saucers have been built by garage mechanics. This is a device found in a barn in Marley Park, Maryland in '49. Another of the secretly funded Illuminati projects that are run in small barns, and after something is built, then it disappears, taken away to a secret location. A turbojet saucer built by the military. We see the air intakes of the turbojet engine. Resemble very much the meter flying disc. This comes from a book by Wendell Stevens. Many designs, subsequent designs, were very little changed copies of the German craft that the Germans built. This is a faint photograph of a craft, and we still see the periphery exhaust nozzles of the jet engine. John Searle built this flying disc for the British Army. This is a small prototype flying. And we see the much larger disc in construction. Here we could see the control panels here. Another major effort was financed by the Vatican using designs and drawings by Tesla and Marconi. A little side story. In 1862, John Keely presented an anti-gravity platform to the War Ministry. They scratched their heads and said, nah, we don't see any utilization for this device. The designs disappeared in the safes of the bankers and the Illuminati. Late last century, beginning of this century, Tesla started building flying devices through secretly funded projects. I have a feeling that the story given by Harbinson in Genesis, the book Genesis, in the fictional book Genesis, is true, that the airship scare of the 1890s was another secretly funded Illuminati project for air transportation, using a hybrid between probably free energy devices and airships. They also claim in that book that they had a turboprop biplane cross the Atlantic before the Wright brothers' plane even took off at Kitty Hawk. There are several books that talk about the Illuminati possessing the radio technology way back during the time of the Napoleonic Wars and being able to rig the London Stock Exchange through getting advance information about Napoleon's defeat and spreading the opposite rumor in England. The stock market crashed and they bought it a penny to the dollar, to the pound, every stock they could lay their hands on. So by keeping this technology secret, they have above everything else a leading competitive edge in the market economy and society compared to all of us. The Tunguska explosion was an Illuminati project for nuclear saucer propulsion, or the first nuclear bomb exploded by the Illuminati. I've heard two rumors about that, and I have a feeling that the moment I saw the debunking film made by Nova, that it was a meteorite that struck Siberia, I got a little bit suspicious, because everything these guys debunk has a grain of truth to it. So there are many Fortean reports about saucers landing, touching down in the early 1900s. People would get out speaking English that would wear the US Navy uniforms. I have a feeling that these were secret devices built for the Navy. Very advanced devices. It's extremely easy to build. The Vatican brokered, financed, and orchestrated the space campaign by the group of Marconi that went to the Andes in the late 40s with the Marconi files given to them by the Vatican, with a financing of about $180 million, which right now would be like $180 billion after inflation. And they built craft that flew over the Washington and the Capitol Hill in 1952.
That was Vatican money there. That was Vatican money.
Vatican coordinated private funding from 2,000 heads of states, bankers, private sources, oil magnates and so on. And later on they built a craft that landed on Mars on Columbus Day 1956. They took the distance in about a day and a half. Narciso Genovese published a book called We Went to Mars that talks in detail about this Vatican space program. Talking about this information, you have to read a lot of Soviet books. The wildest rumors have turned out to be a gross understatement. There were rumors in Germany about concentration camps, but nobody ever imagined that all of Europe would be crisscrossed with concentration camps. Same thing about Russia. The wildest estimates of Russian dissidents about concentration camps were about maybe 10,000 people went through the purges into the camps. Then came Solzhenitsyn with his One Day in the Life of One Denisovich and later the Gulag Archipelago. And he said that maybe 60 million people went through the camps and 20 million did not come back. The ugliness of our world that we live in is many times over the wildest rumors, and history has proved this time and time and again. So all the rumors that we hear about the secret projects run by the secret government are present, but maybe 5%, maybe 10% of what's really going on. This is the Gulag Archipelago, probably the best living fictional author in the world. Ignored by the American media establishment because he dared criticize America and compare them to Russia in their atheistic attitude, creating a society that does not believe in God. After his Harvard commencement speech, nobody ever heard about him anymore. He was like, he got blacklisted in the Orwellian sense of the word. These are major conspiracy books, none dare call it conspiracy, and Fourth Reich of the Rich, detailing the Illuminati financing of the rise of Hitler and the Nazi party to power, the Illuminati financing of the German war effort, their financing of the Russian war effort in order to load the government's credit cards with these war debts, and also to reduce the population. Population reduction is number one on the Illuminati priority list. In this book, and they're called Conspiracy, it became plainly clear to me that the Illuminati also financed the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels to prominence, and the whole creation of the Communist International and the creation of the Communist Manifesto.
Right out of New York City.
Yeah. It's a fascinating book, Fourth Reich of the Rich. Maybe these are the most important conspiracy books that one has to read. Conspiracies on a higher level, Sandel in his Cosmic Conspiracy talks about many hierarchical conspiracies on the planet, till we go to the very pinnacle, the Illuminati Politburo of 10 people, where 2 of them are probably extraterrestrials or hypermaterial extraterrestrial beings. Edgar Hoover himself, Sandel talks in his book, they were trying to pinpoint who are these 10 men, and they pinpointed 8. The remaining 2 were bordering on the paranormal. They were just that. They were beings that would materialize for the hearing, for the commission sitting, and then they would dematerialize. Nobody would be able to trace them going in and out of that building. Talking about conspiracies in academia is a bad taste, to say the least. One is considered a nut, a crackpot, schizophrenic. My view of reality is exactly the opposite. I can label myself as super conspirativist. I believe that the reality that we live in is skillfully managed by a pyramidal, hierarchical layer of conspiracies where inside every secret society you have the core of the next. Inside the Masonic secret society, the top 10% of that society are probably members of the next secret society. Inside that secret society you will get another secret society, and so on in such concentric circles till we approach this top. This is the interface between the terrestrial secret societies and the extraterrestrial visitors that have permanent representative offices on our planet. They are subcontractors of higher levels of management and organization till we go to the pinnacle of these celestial management structures. And that's why I consider it extremely important for someone who is serious into UFOs to go through books like the Urantia book, because it gives the view of the universe from the very top of the Trinitarian management structure. The Wasti book gives this view from the Jehovian perspective. And revelations like Billy Meyer, although Billy Meyer are basically extraterrestrials that are still mortals in the flesh, not much more advanced than we are, still primary schools in the universe. These are major views from different competing hierarchical conspiracy sources, centers. Morals and Dogma, the main book of the Freemasonry, according to several researchers, basically Freemasonry is a secret society that is fulfilling the Luciferian agenda on the planet. The grand, how should I call it, chief or boss, I forgot the real title, of the Freemasons, told a secret meeting of the 33rd degree, basically the Freemasonic Central Committee meeting in the 30s, that they are actually serving Lucifer on this planet. There are very beautiful renditions of Freemasonry from quotations out of their own books that basically show that Freemasonry is a very benevolent, very nice organization in the lower levels where they do all this humanitarian work in the neighborhood. But the higher you go to the top, the more they resemble the Luciferian philosophy in their worldview. conspiracy books of this type, showing a massive government cooperation, secret cooperation with aliens. Sleazy revelations of the close encounters of the sleazy kind, according to the author of this book, Howard Bloom, which I think also took part in the debunking and discrediting of LaRouche and railroading him in prison. I have a feeling that this is the same author. According to him, the government set the first exploratory commission about UFOs in 1989. I mean, this has been the most monstrous disinformation I've ever heard. What's going on behind the scenes? I have a feeling that the Star Trek scenario is true and that the government has had a moon base and a Martian base since the early 50s. We see that the tabloid press is trying to tell us something. Human skeletons on the moon, somebody else took them there, maybe aliens. An airplane on the moon's surface. I have someone who has seen this photo in government archives and trying to get a hold of the real photo of a World War II bomber that was probably teleported or taken up with a saucer to the moon's surface. Maybe is a museum there, aircraft museum. Several books on conspiracies around the space program, the Moon Gate, we saw alien bases on the moon, and many other books, are telling us that there is a massive mining operation going on in the moon. These are 75 feet across mining machines that cultivate the moon's surface, and another smaller reconnaissance vehicle here. There are open water reservoirs, the lakes that we see here, and natural lakes on the moon's surface. Similarly, Californian reservoirs would reflect the light in the same pattern. It's all in Fresh Techniques book. The moon in autumn bloom and spring color, the light gray, the light green coloration of the sparse vegetation, similar to a Californian desert. They've been lying about the gravity on the moon in order to prove to us that there is no atmosphere, because lighter gravity would not sustain atmosphere. The real gravity is about 60% of the Earth. They lie about the water and the air. You can walk slowly and breathe the air without anything.
What about the mass of the moon?
Gravity is proportional not only to the mass, it's proportional to the rotation and to many other factors that our popular physics does not include in the equation.
Oh, yeah?
So the mass is smaller, of course, than the Earth, but there are other factors involved there. So the moon is very easy to populate, and given the easiness of creating a turbojet kerosene-fueled UFO, that's why this hoax is going on and perpetrated upon us, because otherwise every third world nation would be able to build its own craft and go to the moon. And they want to keep the exclusivity of the club. This is possibly how a moon base looks like on the inside and the outside. They are lying about the absence of atmosphere by putting these monstrous suits. Actually, this is a deep diving suit that you don't need on the vacuum, if there is a vacuum on the moon. They would dig a trench, make the special, how should I call it? This is another trench inside the first trench where the hotel rooms would be drilled in the wall, and then they would cover this up with an artificial roof and fill it with dirt on top to keep meteorites from striking the structure. And this is how the structure looks on the inside. There is a theater here where we see the ballet dancers floating in the air. It's not because of the light gravity. It's probably they are using anti-gravity weight control to make a three-dimensional ballet possible. My feeling is that the Star Trek scenario is true, and that the government has been using nuclear-powered ships to fly around the universe for the last 30, 40 years probably. Many of the scientists that disappear end up in the secret underground research projects on this planet and the evacuation and survival colonies on the Moon and Mars. Anyone who has read about universe ethics knows that you don't just steal and snatch children from another planet because the karma is so heavy, you're going to pay it like crazy for many generations to come. In my feeling, the best candidate for the missing children and all these abduction stories that we hear is the government itself. It's a massive genetic research and development campaign that is covered up behind the front of alien-looking cyborgs and true aliens that also took part in this campaign. Patient vanishes into thin air. The teleportation techniques used by the government are usually the techniques that somebody would be snatched and beamed up and on board the ship. A technology that's at least 50 years old, according to our billing and the Philadelphia experiment stories. Other stories about time travel are possibly true because the government has produced compact Philadelphia technology black boxes that can be fitted not only on the B-1 and B-2 bombers, but possibly on some of the fighter planes, which would allow them not only to become invisible, but also to shift position instantaneously and to go back and forth in time. Or maybe they have done this by mistake or as a side effect of the technology, as it happened with the Philadelphia experiment itself. So maybe these stories are true to some respect, and they want to tell us something, that a lot of these projects are going on behind the scenes. Genetic experiments. I mean, after experimenting with robots for all these years and creating mechanical robots in the 40s and 50s in the secret underground black project, then creating biological robots in the 60s and 70s, like the Men in Black. The Men in Black are, in my opinion, a government black project campaign for creating a artificial life that they were used for intimidation of UFO witnesses. Mating of animals with other animals, like these tabloid stories are probably true. Mating of animals with humans has been done many times in our history by other alien races. This is an irresistible itch. They want to play God to outperform the Creator in creating of life. And obviously the creating of life is the biggest hurdle, the biggest nut to crack, the biggest enigma to solve in the universe. My seminar would be on the terrestrial component of the alien presence. 1 century of secret Illuminati research and development in anti-gravity, space flights, and human genetic engineering, conveniently covered up behind real alien visitations. I agree that there are probably 3,000 alien races that visit us each year. I don't want to prove that everything we see in the sky is made here on Earth by our secret space program. But I want to make abundantly clear with my public speaking and the videos that I've been putting out for a year that there's a monstrous secret program run by the terrestrial secret societies that are all coordinated basically by the same general staff of the same command post, regardless of whether these are societies in different countries that are entangled in a Cold War or a hot war or any other confrontation. In my little anthropological studies of anti-gravity, by collecting stories of anti-gravity devices from different places and times, I've realized that anti-gravity is extremely easy to obtain. Simple spinning of an object along the vertical axis would reduce its weight in the same way as simple moving of a conductor with electricity. An electrical conductor moving in a magnetic field, for example, would generate some electrical potential, some electrical current through that conductor, or vice versa. If we have current through a conductor, it could start moving. These are basic qualities of matter and space. We can explain them. We can kind of write formulas about them. Why this happens, physics cannot explain. And in a similar way, anti-gravity is another of the many properties, the basic properties of matter that the ruling elite would like us not to know. Having this in mind, in my workshop, I will go over an extensive 20 years of research and development in anti-gravity in Nazi Germany, and I will show slides and photos of about 50 different models of anti-gravity devices that they built, starting with piston and bank-held engines with propellers going through inboard and outboard, turbojet engines, pulse jets, ramjets, and finally rocket engines that were giving extra-atmospheric capabilities to their craft. Their rocket-powered craft would go in orbit around the Earth and probably even beyond. The Germans built small craft from 30 feet diameter all the way up to 300-400 feet diameter craft. I myself was thinking that I may be a little bit crazy and too far out, because my physics intuition was telling me that it's easy to make a craft, and the Germans definitely had the engineering capability. But until I got these first documentary photographs of low-level demonstration flights over the testing grounds in Germany in 44-45, these are the free energy electromagnetic craft that didn't have any moving part. They had spinning magnetic field spinning around them. And these are the smallest images and the worst photos. In the workshop I have much larger photos. These of you that have been to the UFO Expo West in Los Angeles know these large photographs. Close-ups of the craft in flight that show the identification numbers, that show the tank turrets and standard issue German Tiger tank and Panther tank turrets suspended underneath the craft. These are these are 25-meter diameter. This is about 75 feet diameter tank killer type craft of the Haunebu class. We see the tank turret here, just a very smudged image. On the close-up shots, a friend of mine was able to identify the model of the gun mounted on the tank turret. So detailed the photographs are. The interceptor fighters of the Vril kind were 30 feet diameter, free energy fighters, interceptor fighters, that were reaching 3 times the speed of sound in the atmosphere and definitely had extra-atmospheric capabilities. Here we could see the head of the pilot through the transparent plexiglass cupola, and even the tube and the sunglasses, the 2 dark spots of the sunglasses. The identification numbers are seen, and the secret character image, a symbol for the life force. This is the ruling character of the Vril, the life force. And there's a secret society, the Vril Secret Society, that gave the name of the craft, and the meaning is the secret life force. I will go in much greater detail in my workshop, and I will show the other photographs that are that were taken at a closer range. Also, I would show parts of the German documentary from the secret film that came from the German Secret Society that claims that the Germans landed on Mars with their only craft of the Haunebu 3 type, which was a naval warfare dreadnought of 74 meters diameter, which is about 220-30 feet diameter, free energy monster with 4 naval turrets, triple gun turrets, 3 on the underbelly and 1 on top of the craft. And they claim that this craft was taken with a volunteer suicide crew of Japanese and Germans and crash landed, but survived on Mars in January 1946 after 8 months of heavy flight. The Germans landed on the moon before the war ended, started their first moon base there. There's atmosphere on the moon, and I will show this with documentary NASA films of the moon flag waving like crazy. A film that I got from a very good friend of mine here in Phoenix. The flag waves in a supposedly vacuum, airless environment. In part 3 of my workshop, I'll be talking about all the examples of the conspiracy kind, Alice in the Illuminati social land, the terrestrial component of the alien presence, secret Illuminati collusion with ET races and higher celestial management hierarchies for the last 5,000, maybe 10,000 years or ever since this earth was formed. Illuminati black projects covered up behind alien visitations. One of the wildest stories that I've been pursuing actively is the rumor that the British landed on the moon in the 1890s with a hybrid underground gun slash rocket slash anti-gravity propulsion. And through a very rare video documentary, private video documentary with academician, let's call him academician Anonymous from the secret Russian Institute of Anti-Gravity, he basically talks of similar modes of G-force management, G-force negation at the time of the takeoff of Russian rockets. That was also used in the first manned flight to the moon in the 1890s by a lavishly funded secret Illuminati project. And even this is not the first story about anti-gravity that I've uncovered. John Keely presented a free energy silent flying anti-gravity platform to the War Ministry in the 1862. John Keely, of course, won't be found in any database or textbook. He was a channeling contact-see genius of the Tesla and Schauberger type. So basically, in the Illuminati safes, there have been not only drawings and designs, but actual engineering drawings, because Keely built a lot of these things that he was talking about. He built a 250 horsepower free energy locomotive that was pulling trains. He built tunnel boring devices that were using some strange frequencies that would basically pulverize the rock and go through the rock extremely easily. These are technologies that even by alien admissions are between 5,000 and 25,000 years ahead of their own alien culture. So obviously the Illuminati would not reveal such technology for mass consumption. Tesla worked on anti-gravity devices, and I've discovered a lot of stories in the early 1900s of people seeing flying saucers, lenticular devices with men coming out of them speaking English, American English, and dressed in fittingly US Navy uniforms. I have a suspicion that these have been devices built by Tesla Designs, funded again by the Illuminati, and used for research and for fun of the people that own the planet. The Germans had a very extensive space program, not only with saucers but with rockets. I've discovered several models of rockets that were manned versions, and they shot suborbital astronauts. Even about a month ago, I discovered a photograph of a German spacesuit that was much better than the first crewed Russian and American spacesuits for the Vostok and the Gemini the Mercury program. But basically the German effort at the end of the war was directed at securing their huge underground colony on the South Pole. I have uncovered a documentary Navy film about Admiral Byrd's strange expedition in 46-47 to the South Pole. He went with 3 aircraft armadas, supposedly looking for natural resources, and got beaten in 2 weeks by the Germans, lost most of his planes and hastily retreated, giving an unauthorized interview in Argentina on his way back that the next World War would be with an adversary that comes from the polar regions and that has the capability of flying unobstructedly from pole to pole. These were exactly the first turbojet fighters and Kugelblitzes developed by the Germans. Also, I uncovered information about the Marconi and the Vatican space program using designs by Marconi, who got them from Tesla after Marconi was killed by Duce during the Second World War. The Vatican, after the war, secretly financed and brokered a private research program from the Argentinian Andes that ended up in the overflight of the Washington and the Capitol Hill, the famous 1952 overflight that caused the biggest news conference. 1 minute. And so on. But these are just the beginnings. My feeling is that the Star Trek, I mean, the Russians have been on the moon and Mars for close to maybe 50 years. I've heard that there are on the moon hotels that are 6 kilometers long and 30 stories tall for the workers, the slaves that work in the government colony there. My feeling is that the Star Trek scenario has been true for a small group of elite scientists and army people. But even these transportation capabilities are peanuts compared to the interplanetary teleportation capabilities of the Philadelphia technology that is almost half a century old, and even the intergalactic and inter-universe transportation capabilities of the Phoenix technology, which is the next step of the Philadelphia technology, the time tunneling technology that we saw in the 1960s stories about the time tunnel travel. Still, communication and transportation are not the major thrusts of the terrestrial hierarchy. I think creation of life has been the biggest challenge ever since civilizations were established and disappeared on our planet. Atlantis, Lemuria, the Pleiadians tried it 200,000 years ago. The government has been actively involved in this huge underground archipelago, Frankensteinian factories, with horrific genetic experiments. By the way, we are trying to get a German documentary film from the concentration camps of living, breeding hybrids of humans and animals that the Germans did half a century ago. My feeling is that the little gray abduction scenario is run and organized by the government. There are dozens of little gray races around the universe, but these that we see on this planet are good candidates for the most advanced programs in robotics run by the government. The Men in Black were the next generation of the crude mechanical robots that were built in secret in the 40s and 50s. The Men in Black were probably the first half mechanical, half biological robots. And the little grays are a good candidate for a clone biological robot, entirely biological being, or cyborg. We know that most of the advanced alien races have them anyway. The government could have borrowed the designs from somewhere, or they could have engineered them themselves. But it is my feeling that the little gray abduction scenario is run by the government, and the little grays are the Igors of the underground Frankensteinian factories. There was one last sentence about the alien threat. Let's say the television series, The V. Anyone who has been a little bit into UFOs and contact team knows that you don't land and occupy a planet unless the government of the planet lets you in. If the government doesn't want you to land on the planet, there won't be any shortage of volunteer extraterrestrial races to rid the planet from the invaders. And I have a feeling that there are 911 celestial lines available, and all the government has to do is cry help, and the little grays will leave the planet in, if not milliseconds, then probably hours or days. So the alien invasion is a very necessary external enemy situation for the government. After the collapse of the Russian there is no rationale behind keeping the secrecy of these underground installations. The only way for the government to continue with this tremendous totalitarian secrecy is to find short-term foreign enemies like the Saddams and the Hussein's and the little countries, but these are interim external threats. The alien threat is a good candidate for a long-term external threat that is so useful. The Russians were the best enemy money could buy for Wall Street because through the financing of the Russian Revolution and keeping this Mickey Mouse smokescreen enemy for half a century, the American Eagle Army was able to dig deep underground and to go forward with these advanced black projects. So all these will be dealt with in detail at my workshop tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention. The workshop is basically 500 slides and the rest is videotapes. It's all documentary material, photographic drawings, very little of speculation. Thank you very much. I think the workshop is 10 a.m. tomorrow.